Hey guys, Hawk here. So I was going to make this into two different parts for all of the bodywork, but I ended up making it just one big long part that's almost 20 minutes long. So I either apologize or you're welcome, depending on how you look at it. But let's go ahead and jump right into the building. Okay, so I have installed these switches. I've made this custom polycarbonate plate to hold said switches. These are Cherry MX greens. I believe I've mentioned these before. And they're basically the same as blues. They're tactile and clicky, except they have a heavier spring load, so they feel a little bit better under your finger for an individual button. And those I've cut out a little notch right here, but that's going to sit there like that. And then this is going to sit right on top of here like this. And those will be at a slight diagonal, kind of like that. And then I'm going to put another polycarbonate plate on top of here so it's flush with this. And then I'm going to smooth all of that out because, like I said before, I want to fill in these lines anyway because I'm hydro dipping and I don't really want all of this high definition in here. And probably, like some of these, I'm probably going to all fill in. I might leave that one because I might actually make that a black tip there. But I'm thinking about even filling up these, simply because these parts are going to go on top of it like this. And so since this is going to be black, obviously, I think I might want to make this level with everything else and then just clean that up, because then we're also going to have the black down here and this is going to be black. So just kind of make everything as even as I can, and that's the plan so far. This side is going to remain as flat as I can get it, not only from a functional point of view, but when you put down your blaster, you don't want to have buttons on both sides because then you're going to hit a button either way you put your blaster down. So that would kind of suck. There are some things money can't buy, and that is the pleasure of a perfect fitting piece. Watch this. Just going to let it sit on there. Look at that. No stress at all. Just sits right in there and click. Look at that. I'm pretty happy with that fit. So I have here a piece of polycarbonate that I epoxied in place. Oh wait, no, I didn't. I just actually fit that in there well enough where it almost has a friction fit. You can see kind of that little ridge I've given. It's thinner on this side, up on the top here, so it kind of pops into that. And I'm going to epoxy that into place, and then I will focus. Then I will go ahead and put some epoxy putty over it, just to kind of fill in that little bit of margin left and smooth everything out. But I'm just putting some polycarbonate pieces, some backing on here, just so it's not solid epoxy putty, because I don't like using too much epoxy putty on things, because if it flexes too much back and forth, it'll eventually delaminate from the plastic, because epoxy sculpt and epoxy putty isn't meant to flex like that. So I'm minimizing my usage of it. There's going to be some in this curve area because it'd be just a little too much work to try to carve out something from PVC or something. It'll just be a lot easier to fill that in. But with this plate here, it's no longer just going to be a giant chunk that's filling this entire area. Same thing with this. I might actually make a plate to go on top of here, just cut out of 1/4 inch PVC. And that's because I want to put a voltmeter up here. If I just have a huge glob of epoxy putty, then that might get a little bit in the way. So I might actually make a plate up here, but these curves, it's a 3-dimensional curve, it's not just 2-dimensional, so it's a little bit easier on me. And then same with down here, probably just epoxy putty, maybe a plate, I'm not sure yet. It might just be epoxy putty because it's not going to be that big of a glob, as you can see. But for the most part, I'm almost finished with the assembling of all of the jigsaw pieces, and then I will move on to the body sculpting more. Okay, so I've gone ahead and put all of the epoxy putty on, and then I've started to sand it away. I'm using this little attachment thing that goes up to the Dremel, not because it's easier for me to control or whatever, but actually the thinness of the handle helps me keep this bit flat up against this, because if I'm at an angle like this, that's obviously digging a little point into the blaster, and that's harder to control as opposed to when it's flat like this and I have more contact area. So I'm slowly going through. I have some other materials in here. This is all PVC up at the top here. Focus. And then that goes into polycarbonate, and that's just holding this on because I've cut this down completely so that it is more in line with everything. Probably going to cut a hole somewhere right here for a voltmeter. And I've got everything relatively smooth. This is pretty good for a first coat. I'm going to come back and fill everything in again, as well as some of these parts. This is going to be completely filled in. And pretty sure... And I'm pretty sure I'm getting pretty close on this side. Again, that's just one layer, so that's not bad. I want to come in and fill all of these. I'm going to leave this major indentation right here, but all of these little lines and stuff, I'm going to be filling in like this. So, flip it on this side. This side actually doesn't need a whole lot of putty work. I need some up here. I need some in here. In here. Up here, obviously, I need some in here. This is very messy. I need to clean it up. A little bit in this crack right here. Back here. Actually, not even that much back here. Just a little bit right there. Need to fill in this entire thing here. But it's actually... And then back there. But it's actually relatively clean for what it is. Still got to fill in this front gap right there as well. So this is all done with, the initial is done with the Dremel. A lot of people think, oh, you can't use a Dremel to shape anything. Well, that's exactly what the Dremel's for. The Dremel's for shaping. The sandpaper and the files are for smoothing it down. Now, I do use the files for a little bit of shaping in some of these smaller spots where I can't really get my Dremel in. But for the most part, I do my shaping with the Dremel, and that saves a lot of time. I actually put this on, and then this only took about an hour to sand this way. So it's not about the hours that you put into a blaster. If you're like, oh, I have 300 hours into this blaster, that might actually not be a good thing. There is such a thing as too much work, making too much work for yourself. If I was going to do all of this by hand, like hand sanding, I can do that, and I have done it before, but it's much, much, much faster to do it with a Dremel. And it takes a little bit of skill because it's very easy. One dig in there and your entire thing is, well, ruined. But not ruined. You can fill it back in with epoxy putty. But it's very easy to ruin something, especially with this texture that I want to keep intact. It would be very easy to accidentally bump into that and then ruin the entire thing because I can't get this texture back. So... It's kind of high risk, high reward, because this is, again, this only took an hour. And for some people, that's like, how did that only take an hour? But again, just shave off a lot with the Dremel, and then, you know, come back in and smooth it down with some files and sandpaper. But this is just the first layer. Still got some cracks in here like this. This isn't an actual crack. It's just an indentation. Focus. It's just an indentation right there that I need to fill in. Need to fill in that little hole right there. I want to get this kind of relatively smooth, more smooth than the rest of my blasters, which is why I filled in this, because it's going to be hydro dipped, and I want that pattern to show really, really nice. I don't want 1,000 tiny little nooks and crannies everywhere. So look at the overall shape, and I'm aware that there's backlighting on that. I'm looking at the shape alone, not the detail. So still need to fill in. Focus. Still need to fill in down here. You can see that little dent right there. I'm going to fill that all the way up to here. So a little bit of work up here, a little bit of epoxy up there, but so far so good. Okay, so I've done enough sanding where I think it deserves an update. I've filled in all the little details like focus, like back there. and I've kind of started to grind off in there, and I've come in here and I've filled up this, and I've filled in this little spot right here because I didn't want to worry about paint not getting into there. What is with this focus? My camera's been having real trouble focusing, but getting in here, and all of this in there, underneath there, in front of here, getting some of those cracks in there, and then turning this around. And then all along that right there, top rail, and then filling in all of this and getting that as smooth as I can. Obviously filling in this big spot right here, getting all the way around, and I've been working several hours on this. I don't know how many, probably 15 hours of sanding by now. And I've been using a combination of this little pencil grinder to get into some of the smaller spots, like in these and all in there. And this little flat bit right here to kind of make some really sharp cuts, like down here and all along these. And then mostly for the flats and stuff has been a drum sanding bit. So that's mostly done, I want to say. Then I've had 2 different layers of the epoxy putty. I think that's it for the epoxy putty. I might make one last check to see. After that is going to be the spot putty, and that fills in all the micro divots and stuff. And then I still got to cut up a hole here for the voltmeter that's going to go on top there, something like that. And that one's just going to be white because this is going to have RGB LEDs, so I can't really pick one, and white will go with everything, so that works. Getting down to the wire, because I have like less than a month before I need to ship this out. I think I have like 3 weeks or something. But I'm going to try to knuckle down on this because I'm done with my travels, or at least travels till... Wow, this autofocus is really bad. I need to look into fixing that. I noticed it was doing that on my other video when I wasn't paying attention. Anyway, I'm going to try to knuckle down on this because I'm done with all my traveling until Endwar. And so I can finally... I've gotten all of the stuff that I need to get out ASAP because I was starting to get a little bit behind there. I'm back on track with that, so I can start knuckling down on this a little bit more. I've got all the parts cast up for the other one, for the Raven. I need to cast the parts for this because these are going to be crystal clear, and so I need to do that rather soon because that takes a while to cure. And by a while, I mean like 2 weeks, so I need to do that soon. The switch for the LEDs is going to be back here, just like on my other things, so I need to remember to cut out a hole there. So the way this is going, I need to get this out. I'm tired of thinking about it. I have this little battery holder. This just holds 3 AAAs, and I'm just going to integrate it inside there. And to replace the batteries, unfortunately, you'll just have to take the shell apart. Not a big deal, but because you're not going to be replacing that very often, I still have the 4 AA's running Ethereal Fortress for the LEDs. Not as many LEDs that it's going to be in this one, but you're not going to be changing it out every week. It's going to be a sit-down thing where you're like, okay, I guess my batteries are starting to get low. So not that big of a deal, but I just don't have any room anywhere else. I didn't have time to make a door right here. If I could have made one, but it would have looked kind of crappy and kind of half-assed, and I didn't want that. So, just gonna do it right the first time. So right now, I'm cutting out the place for the voltmeter. And basically how I go about doing this is I hold it on there as square as I can in both relevance to focus. I try to center it on there as best as I can from one side of the shell to the other side of the shell, and making sure it's kind of centered in there using caliper or whatever I need to do, make sure it's level. And then I trace it out as best I can with a Sharpie. You can see the first time I did it was a little bit low, so I moved it up a little bit, and that's because of these 2 posts right here and on the corresponding side. And that wasn't a big deal, so I went ahead and took a cutter bit and literally just kind of dipped it in there several times until I cut it out enough where I could shimmy it back and forth to cut out all the little slots I had made. And then I used some files. I used a flat file, and I also used a triangle file for some of the corners. And I filed that down until I got that to fit in there really, really snugly. And then I lined up the shell through the back here, and then the handle and stuff like that, and make sure everything is on there square on all sides. And then I came back through here and marked again where I need to be. And I'm just approaching that fine line where I need to kind of dial it in. It's a little more tricky on this side where I need to kind of file on both ends to make sure that it's aligning in there perfectly. But it's a slow process, but you just kind of have to file a little bit and then test fit it again and keep doing that until you get it to where you need to be. Then I can worry about this depth a little bit later. I went ahead and cleaned out this and drilled the hole for the voltmeter switch. And then the last hole I need to make is right here where I put the little toggle switch for the LEDs. So you can see right there I've cut off a little bit too much. Kind of see in there. For the most part, all the way around, that's actually pretty tight in there, but I have a little gap right there, and that's actually not that big of a deal. I'm just going to fill that in with, I'm not quite sure yet, either a little bit of epoxy putty or spot putty. I'll just fill it in with a little bit of something and then sand it back down, so it's not that big of a deal. But I'd rather it be on one of these edges as opposed to the top or bottom that's actually friction fitting this on here. I'm going to be hot gluing this in. I hot glue all my electronics in because if I need to ever replace them, hot glue is easy to take out, kind of a temporary thing. It's better to have this friction fit by the frame, so this isn't that big of a deal because it's not applying that much force anyway, because it's only going to be the clamping force, which is minimal. But that's looking pretty good. Very flush. I guess a mildly important part of this process that I never really go over is the fact that I wash this quite a bit. I don't use soap because I'm kind of scared that I won't be able to wash it all off or I'll miss something, and then obviously soap on your plaster when you're trying to make things stick to it is not the best idea. So I just use water and I use a chip brush and I get all of the places, because if you just wash it off, all of the micro dust will stay on there. So you have to make sure that you're rubbing every spot to wash it off completely. But basically, I go over the entire thing inside and out, and every layer I put on there, so that way there's no dust after the sanding, so that this spot putty all stays on there. I put spot putty everywhere. It's very, very soft, so it's easy to sand away, but it fills in all those little cracks so that you're not having to deal with that. And I need to see if I can find a fix for my phone because it keeps going out of focus and that's really annoying. And then I just got this Worker extended mag release. Personally, I don't like the extended mag releases. They're really not for me. I have my own reasons for not liking them, but I know a lot of other people like them. So I'm going to be including this because this is going to be crystal clear parts and you shouldn't notice any difference in color. So it requires a little bit of cutting. You can see I've already made the marks where I need to, and I did this by just pulling this over this way and measuring what I needed to do right there, and then coming back in this way and actually keeping it straight and seeing where I needed to cut in there and then making the marks. So I'll go in with the Dremel, make the marks here, make sure everything's fitting on this side, and then I will do the same on that side. I'll fit the shell over and try to get that as accurate as I can. Doing a little bit at a time, that way I'm not doing too much. And I think that is going to be it for this body work. I'm pretty sure this is the only body work that I had left, and now I do believe that is complete, so it's going to be on to the next steps. So I'm pretty sure that is going to be the end for this build log. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, as always. Thanks for watching.